1,000 years ago, close your eyes for a moment and imagine it. No electricity humming in the background. No cars speeding past. No screens glowing in your hands. Just firelight, the sound of footsteps on dirt, and the creak of wooden carts rolling slowly over cobblestones. 1025. Castles are still being built. Kingdoms rise and fall like waves. And the rhythm of life is utterly unlike the one we know today. But here's the real question. If you woke up in that world tomorrow morning, how long would you survive? Leave your guess in the comments right now. Would you last a week, a month, or would you be gone in a day? Because life 1,000 years ago was not just different. It was harsher, stranger, and in many ways utterly alien to our modern minds. Yet it was also full of rituals, chivalry, ingenuity, and stories that shaped the very foundations of who we are today. Let's step back into that world. If you were an ordinary person 1,000 years ago, chances are high you were a farmer. In fact, around 90% of the world's population lived in small rural communities tied to the soil that fed them. From the English countryside to the fields of China, the vast majority of people spent their days planting, weeding, and harvesting. Your hands would be blistered, your back bent, your face brown from the sun. And the work never ended. But survival wasn't guaranteed. One bad harvest could mean famine. In Europe, villages lived on bread, porridge, and whatever vegetables they could grow. Turnips, beans, onions, cabbage. Meat was a luxury, often reserved for festivals. And for those under the rule of feudal lords, much of what you grew wasn't even yours. Taxes, tithes, and obligations drained the baskets before you could feed your family. Yet, amid the backbreaking labor, there was community. Picture this, long summer evenings when neighbors gathered, sharing ale brewed at home, singing songs that carried across the fields, children running barefoot through the grass, laughter around the fire after days of endless toil. Hardship was constant, but so was resilience. Now let's wander into the cities, small by modern standards, but bustling with life. A big city in Europe might have had 10,000 to 20,000 people, tiny compared to today's megacities. Streets were narrow, crowded, and often filthy, with pigs wandering freely and chamber pots emptied into gutters. Imagine the smell. Yet these were also centers of energy. Markets rang with the clatter of coins and shouts of merchants. Exotic spices from the East, rare fabrics, and strange goods found their way into these towns, hinting at a wider world few would ever see. Guilds of craftsmen controlled trades: blacksmiths, carpenters, weavers, masons. If you had a skill, you belonged to a guild, a powerful brotherhood that determined standards, prices, and often politics. Apprentices as young as 12 worked long hours, dreaming of one day becoming master of style. But let's not romanticize it too much. Fire was a constant threat. One stray spark could wipe out entire neighborhoods of wooden homes. Disease stalked the crowded streets. A simple cut might kill you if infection set in. Average life expectancy? Barely 30 to 40 years. And yet, if you survived childhood, if you avoided war and plague, you could live into your 60s or beyond. In a way, not so different from today. Speaking of war, violence was never far away. Castles dotted the landscape, not just as symbols of power, but as fortresses of survival. Lords ruled their lands with armies of knights, heavily armored warriors bound by oaths of loyalty. Imagine the sight: gleaming chainmail, banners whipping in the wind, the thunder of hooves shaking the ground. Knights weren't just fighters, they were celebrities, the superheroes of their time. But here's a twist. The reality of knights wasn't as glamorous as the legends. Jousting tournaments may sound noble, but they were brutal, bloody affairs. In chivalry, that ideal of honor and protection was often more fantasy than fact. Peasants rarely saw kindness from their lords. Still, these ideals shaped centuries of storytelling. Beyond Europe, empires thrived. In the Middle East, the Islamic Golden Age was flourishing, with scholars in Baghdad translating ancient Greek texts, inventing algebra, and charting the stars. In China, under the Song dynasty, paper money was first introduced, revolutionizing trade. Across the Americas, the great city of Tula in Mesoamerica stood with towering warrior statues, while the Mississippian culture built monumental earth mounds. 1,000 years ago, the world was deeply interconnected, more than we often imagine. But let's get more personal. What did people do all day? Daily life revolved around the seasons. Wake at sunrise, sleep at sunset. Light came from candles or fire, precious and fragile. No clocks, just the bells of churches or mosques marking time. Clothes were handmade, often scratchy wool or linen. Washing was rare. Most people bathed only a handful of times a year, if that. Some historians argue the smell of the medieval world would have been overwhelming to us. Yet perfumes, scented herbs, and bathing traditions persisted in some cultures, especially in the Islamic world, where public baths were common. And education? For most, it was non-existent. Only a small fraction of people could read or write, usually clergy or scholars. Imagine a world where knowledge was locked away in Latin, accessible only to the privileged few. Books were copied by hand, page by painstaking page. Each one took months, sometimes years, to complete. To own a book was to hold a treasure. Religion, of course, was at the center of life. In Europe, the church was not just a place of worship, but the beating heart of communities. Festivals, rituals, births, marriages, and deaths, all tied to faith. In the Islamic world, scholars preserved and advanced knowledge, while mosques provided not just spiritual guidance, but centers of learning. Across the globe, traditions, myths, and rituals gave structure to the chaos of life. But here's something you might not expect. People laughed, joked, and told stories, just as we do. In taverns, travelers swapped tales of ghosts, miracles, and monsters lurking in the forests. Children played with carved wooden toys, sang rhymes, and chased each other through dusty streets. Love blossomed too. Though marriages were often arranged, poems, songs, and whispered meetings in the shadows tell us that passion was alive and well. Still, the shadow of death was never far. Infant mortality was tragically high. Plague swept through without mercy. In 1025, Europe had not yet faced the devastation of the Black Death, but smaller outbreaks of disease claimed thousands. In other parts of the world, natural disasters, wars, and famines struck regularly. Life was fragile, uncertain, and every breath carried weight. And yet, out of this fragility came resilience. People built cathedrals that reached for the heavens, poems that still echo today, inventions that transformed societies. They dreamed beyond survival. They left us not just ruins, but legacies. So how did people live 1,000 years ago? They lived with hardship, yes, but also with joy. They lived closer to the land, more aware of the seasons, dependent on community. They lived with faith, with fear, with wonder. Their world was smaller in some ways, but no less full of meaning. And maybe if we could step back into that time, we'd find that their lives weren't so alien after all. After all, they worried about family, about food, about love and loss. They told stories to make sense of the world. They dreamed of a better future, just like us. So if you did wake up in the year 1025 tomorrow morning, maybe, just maybe, you'd last longer than you think. Thank you for walking through history with me. If you enjoyed this journey, help grow our community of time travelers by hitting the like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next story. This is Time's Battlefield, where the past is never truly gone. It's waiting to be rediscovered.